All right. Well, we are here with Donny Emler Jr. from FMF. First and foremost, man, just thank you for joining us on the Moto Minded Podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Stoked what you guys are up to, and obviously with everything you guys got going on with Moto Delivered, and just thinking outside the box, I guess inside the box, but outside in your marketing mind. And I appreciate that for sure, and dig everything you guys are doing and about. And I think it's great for our sport in general to have more people like you guys digging in deep.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, inside and outside of the box. I like that angle. I've never thought of that, but
there we go.
Right
That's
on,
a new
man.
new tagline for you.
Yeah. All right. So, first thing I kind of wanted to dig into is just kind of, early days, like the backstory on FMF. And then that'll kind of, segue us into, like where your role, like when you started, your first job within the company. So maybe give us just a little bit of a backstory on, how your dad started the company, and then we'll, kind of go through that story.
Yeah, I feel like I need to jump back into time a little bit. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall back in, the early 70s for the whole just motocross era. I mean, everything that was going on, it was such a new and upcoming sport, and it was so accessible for people to do. Bikes at the time, weren't super expensive. Obviously everything's relative to the dollar. But more riding areas were open. There was just, you could race literally around just SoCal. Like you could race every night of the week. There was something going on either, at Ascot or Saddleback or all these legendary, motorsports parks that just had like night racing and stuff. So there was just much more of a scene back then. I mean, it's hard to think that there's more of a scene what there is now, because I feel like, motocross is so popular, especially, with COVID. It actually, as it kind of ramped up anything that had to do with outdoor sports, which, none of us were really expecting that. But going back to the 70s, my dad was just a young kid and racing his dirt bike at the local tracks. And, it was always, since he was a kid, he was always tinkering on his own stuff, whether it was, go-karts in the backyard or, first motorcycles. And so as, he started racing more and becoming part of the scene in SoCal, and actually even driving up to Northern California, like to hit races up there, he was always just kind of known for popping up his own bike. And then it kind of became something to where people were coming to him and saying, "Hey man, I want you to work on my bike. I see what you're doing. I want to get one of those custom pipes. I want, that new cylinder head you built." So it kind of sparked some interest there. And some of the pros started coming to him, and it kind of really took off when, Marty Smith and when he was racing for Honda, actually like my dad's setup better than the factory Honda setup.
So it was more like a service in the early days. It was, someone knew him,
totally.
And then it became like, oh, these guys are getting huge and now they want me. So yeah, it kind of snowballed, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of snowballed. I mean, he had a brand. He started FMF, the Fly Machine Factory. It was out of his garage. People saw him racing. They started calling him, there's been some different terms for what FMF stands for, but they started calling him the fast mother effer back in the day. And, which is pretty cool to think. My dad actually had some speed. It's hard to keep up with him now. So I can imagine, that he definitely had some speed back in the day. But just fully snowballed from there. He started getting, his stuff on some factory, race teams and riders. And back then it wasn't just exhaust. What we do now it was motors, it was swing arms. It was basically taking, kind of what's behind me here, this CR 125, Honda Elsinore. This bike, they sold so many of these motorcycles. It was crazy the amount of bikes they sold back in the day. I should probably know offhand, what the quantity was. It was just mind blowing. But, they came, bone stock, and the whole thing was, FMF was built as a hop up, company, an aftermarket company to make your bike better. And, obviously to this day, that's still what we do, but we focus on obviously the exhaust side of things. So, it's like you said, it snowballed from there and just kind of grew. And that iconic red and yellow logo was placed on some of the best riders in the world, their motorcycle jerseys. My dad had a race team where all the guys had red and yellow helmets. So it's just been branded like that, that iconic logo, and we haven't really changed it. It's always red and yellow. teams ask us, sometimes, if they can change the logo to match the color of their bike, and absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's you can't mess with the logo. So, and I grew up in this sport, and it's been a great, opportunity to grow up around something like FMF racing as a kid, and seeing, where my dad, started in a garage. My furthest memory back was, he was living in his first shop. It was like a 3,000 square foot little shop in Harbor City here. And he was living in a loft he built, like a little mezzanine loft, and that's where he was living. I thought, man, my dad's so cool. He gets to live in like this tree house up in his his shop, but that's just how dedicated he was to the sport, and how much passion that he had, and that kind of has been passed down to me, and fortunate enough to grow up in this industry, and kind of take lessons that I've learned from being around, what my dad's built, and kind of, figuring out my own, carving out my own little niche in the sport of, kind of the marketing, business development side. And, ever since I was a kid graduating high school, I kind of just jumped on board to wanting to work, for FMF racing, and kind of going to the tracks with the box van, and hitting local races, and supporting, the amateur grassroots level, and kind of built up this whole rider support element of FMF, and really giving back to the people that are spending a lot of money, to go racing. And
so I mean, sorry to cut you off, but was that like kind of your first role within the company? I mean, I know since it's a family deal, it probably wasn't like, you weren't applying for a job and then got that official job, like I'm sure it was just like, hey, here's something to do. Like, what was that first official, like maybe not official is the right word. What was just like the first kind of task, or like, I guess, job within the company that you were given, by your dad? What was that?
Well, I think the first job I was given was sweeping floors, and when I was like early, coming to work in the summer, trying to make a couple bucks. But
Sure.
My first role, I was just working, in-house sales, answering phone calls, taking orders, helping with, questions, concerns with product, what have you. And
back when everything was probably on paper, I'm guessing.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Writing down orders, writing down credit card numbers, like all the whole thing. And, but I kind of miss it actually talking on the phone to people, right? Instead of just constant, chit chatting on DMs and Zoom calls.
This is the closest we get now. This is like the genuine thing. There's email and text, which is like as far as you can get. And then like, this is our now like in person, I guess.
Get it. Yeah. I mean, emails have made everything so accessible, but it's also kind of a downfall, because you're just now required to like, you need to reply like right away. Like, I emailed you, like there's no like, hey, I'm going to give you a shout back later. It's like, no, now.
Yeah.
Like,
if it's the next day, it's like, oh, they're furious. They're furious. They're just furious with me now.
Exactly. But I saw, the box van was sitting here, and I was like, hey man, can I start taking that thing to go to the races? And at the time I wasn't even really racing motocross. I grew up with my dad riding off-road. And I would race and ride, every once in a while, but I just never really took it super serious. I just wanted to be able to do it, like, and be kind of a well-rounded rider. And I still, to this day, I love, I off-road ride a lot, and I have my motorbike, and I race for fun. So that was kind of like the spark of my interest, is just getting out in front of people. And I love, talking to people. I love, talking about our product, being around, racers and people that share the same passion of throwing a leg over a dirt bike, and that's kind of what was like my first kind of role, just kind of kicked it off there. And the great thing is, like, my dad's always been super cool of like, hey, let me kind of, steer the ship in the direction that I feel like the brand is going. Obviously, we're producing a great product first and foremost, but, telling the story and, being a family run business. And, I think that just strikes people as like, they feel like they can be a part of FMF. And I think that's probably our strongest suit, besides making a great product that we manufacture, here in the United States, in Southern California, of all places. Right. So,
that's rad, man. I mean, I've noticed that that's pretty consistent with a lot of the brands and, leaders of companies within this industry. It's just very like grassroots. It's very like they sacrificed a lot to do that. And it was, it plays into like, you have to be so passionate